Welcome, dear listener, to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight, we invite you to drift into peaceful slumber as we journey back through the mists of time, to an age before recorded history, to the kingdoms that existed before the great flood swept across the world. Close your eyes, settle into your pillow, and let your breathing slow as we explore the ancient mysteries of the Anunnaki, those beings who, according to ancient Mesopotamian texts, descended from the heavens and walked among humanity in the distant past. Take a deep breath in and slowly release it. Let the tensions of your day dissolve as we travel together to a time when the world was young, when gods and humans lived side by side, when great cities rose from the plains between two rivers, and when knowledge beyond imagination was gifted to mankind. The story we share tonight comes from the oldest written records of human civilization, from clay tablets pressed with cuneiform script over 4,000 years ago, from the libraries of Babylon and Nineveh, from the temples of Sumer and Akkad. These are not mere myths or fantasies, but the sacred histories preserved by the ancient peoples who came before us, passed down through countless generations, whispered in the darkness of temple sanctuaries, and now shared with you as you drift toward peaceful sleep. Let your body sink deeper into your bed. Feel the weight of your limbs becoming heavier, your muscles releasing their grip, your mind opening to the ancient past. In the beginning, long before the great flood, before the kingdoms of men rose and fell like waves upon the shore, there existed a time of wonder. The ancient Sumerians called it the antediluvian period, the time before the deluge, when the world was governed by different laws, when beings of immense power and knowledge walked the earth, when the boundaries between heaven and earth were not as fixed as they later became. The Anunnaki, their name means those who from heaven to earth came, and according to the most ancient texts, this is precisely what they did. They descended from the celestial realms, from a place the Sumerians called the heavens, and they brought with them the gifts of civilization itself. Let your breathing become slower now, deeper, as we picture this ancient world. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, was lush and fertile in those distant days before the flood. The climate was different then, milder, more temperate. Great forests covered lands that would later become desert. Rivers flowed with abundance. The earth yielded her treasures freely, and into this paradise came the Anunnaki. The oldest king lists of Sumer speak of a time when kingship was lowered from heaven, when the first cities were established, when civilization itself was a divine gift rather than a human invention. These king lists record the names of rulers who reigned for thousands upon thousands of years, spans of time that boggle the modern mind. But to the ancient scribes who carefully preserved these records, these were simple historical facts, numbers to be recorded with the same precision as any other data. Close your eyes more fully now. Let the ancient world materialize in your mind's eye. See the great city of Eridu, the very first city, rising from the marshlands near the Persian Gulf. Its ziggurat temple reaches toward the sky, a mountain made by hands, a stairway between heaven and earth. This was the dwelling place of Enki, one of the great Anunnaki lords, the god of wisdom and water, the friend of mankind. Enki's temple at Eridu was called the Abzu, the house of the cosmic waters, the source of all knowledge and magic. Here, in the coolness of the temple's inner sanctum, Enki kept the sacred Me, the divine decrees that governed all aspects of civilization. These were not abstract concepts, but tangible objects of power, tablets or crystals or devices beyond description, each one containing the essence of a particular art or science or social institution. Let yourself drift deeper now, your consciousness flowing like the ancient rivers, carrying you back to the time before the flood. According to the ancient texts, particularly the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, the story of the Anunnaki begins not on Earth, but in the heavens. There was a cosmic hierarchy, a divine family with complex relationships and struggles for power that would eventually spill over into the mortal realm. At the apex stood Anu, the Sky Father, the king of the gods, whose name means simply heaven. Anu ruled from the celestial city, a place of unimaginable splendour, that existed beyond the visible sky. Though Anu rarely descended to Earth himself, his will and his authority pervaded everything. He was the source of kingship, the legitimizer of power, the distant but ultimate authority to whom all others answered. Anu had many children, but 3 stood supreme among the Anunnaki. These were Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag. Each would play a crucial role in the unfolding drama of the antediluvian world. Each would shape humanity's destiny in profound ways, and each represented different aspects of divine power and purpose. Your eyelids are growing heavier now, so heavy, as we meet each of these great beings in turn. Enlil, whose name means Lord Wind, or Lord of the Command, was the chief executive of the Divine Council. If Anu was the distant king, Enlil was the active ruler, the one who enforced divine law, who maintained cosmic order, who held the tablets of destiny. Enlil's city was Nippur, the religious centre of all Sumer, the place where heaven and earth were believed to be held together. His temple there, the Akur, the mountain house, was the most sacred site in all of Mesopotamia. Enlil was strict, even harsh at times. He represented authority, discipline, the stern father who demanded obedience. The ancient texts describe him as easily angered, quick to punish transgression, yet also just and necessary. Without Enlil's firm hand, chaos would consume the ordered world. He was the storm, powerful and sometimes terrifying, but also the bringer of life-giving rain. Now let your attention drift to Enki, so different from his brother Enlil, where Enlil represented authority and power. Enki embodied wisdom and creativity. Enki was the clever one, the problem solver, the friend of humanity. His realm was the Abzu, the sweet waters that flowed beneath the earth, the source of all rivers and springs. Enki was a god of magic and incantation, of craftsmanship and ingenuity. He understood the deep secrets of nature, the hidden patterns that connected all things. The ancient texts present Enki in a remarkably sympathetic light. Unlike Enlil, who often saw humans as noisy annoyances, Enki genuinely cared for mankind. He was their protector, their teacher, their advocate in the councils of the gods. Time and again, when other Anunnaki sought to destroy or diminish humanity, it was Enki who found a way to save them. Feel yourself sinking deeper into rest as we turn to the third great deity, Ninhursag, the mother goddess. She had many names: Ninmah, Nintu, Belet-Ili, all signifying her role as the Great Mother. Ninhursag was associated with the mountains, with the earth itself, with birth and fertility and nurture. In the creation of humanity, she would play an indispensable role, using her divine knowledge to shape the clay of the earth into living beings. These 3, Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag, formed a sort of divine triad that governed the affairs of Earth in the antediluvian age. Below them were hundreds of other Anunnaki, each with their own duties, their own cities, their own spheres of influence. There was Utu, the sun god who brought light and justice; Nanna, the moon god who measured time; Inanna, the goddess of love and war whose power rivaled even the great gods; and so many others. Let your mind rest easy, your body completely relaxed, as we explore what these beings did on Earth in those primordial days. The ancient texts tell us that the Anunnaki came to Earth for a purpose. They were not merely visiting. They were not tourists from the heavens. They came to work, to extract resources, to accomplish tasks that required the rich bounty of this blue and green world. According to the Atrahasis epic, one of the oldest and most complete flood stories we possess, the Anunnaki originally did this work themselves. For thousands of years, the lesser gods, those Anunnaki of lower rank, toiled in the earth. They dug canals and rivers, they cleared the marshlands, they extracted precious minerals from deep mines, they performed the back-breaking labour that made civilization possible. But the work was hard, endless, exhausting. The lesser Anunnaki began to complain. They grew weary of their toil. The resentment festered, grew, until finally it exploded in open rebellion. Picture it now as you drift towards sleep. The lesser gods gathering in secret, their voices rising in protest. How long must we endure this? They asked one another. We are divine beings, yet we labour like slaves. How long before we are freed from this burden? The mutiny came at night. The working Anunnaki surrounded the house of Enlil himself, burning their tools, declaring they would work no more. It was a crisis of cosmic proportions. The order of heaven and earth was threatened. Something had to be done. A great council was called. Anu descended from the highest heaven. Enlil was furious, ready to punish the rebels, but Enki, clever Enki, proposed a different solution. "Let us create a substitute worker," he said. "Let us make a being who can do this labour in the place of the gods. Let us create mankind. Your breathing is so slow and steady now, so peaceful." As we come to this pivotal moment in cosmic history, the decision was made. Humanity would be created, fashioned from the clay of the earth, given life by divine essence, designed specifically to serve the gods, to do the work the Anunnaki no longer wished to do. But this was not a simple task. Creating life, even for gods, required tremendous knowledge and skill. Ninhursag stepped forward. She was the expert in such matters, the mistress of the womb, the one who understood how life came into being. But even she needed help, needed a special ingredient, something that would give these clay creatures consciousness, intelligence, the ability to think and plan and work. The solution was both ingenious and terrible. One of the gods would be sacrificed. His essence, his breath, or ghost, as the texts call it, would be mixed with the clay. In most versions of the story, this sacrificial god was named Wiila, or Geshtui, a being whose very name meant the god who has intelligence. He was slain, his blood and his life force mixed with the clay of the earth, and from this divine mixture, humanity was formed. Ninhursag moulded the first humans with her own hands. She pinched off 14 pieces of clay, 7 to become men, 7 to become women. She placed them in her divine womb, and after the proper period of gestation, the first human beings emerged into the world. Let yourself imagine this moment, this cosmic birth. The first humans, opening their eyes for the first time, breathing the air of Earth, looking up at their creators. What did they feel? What did the Anunnaki feel, looking down at these new creatures, these beings made in their image, yet also so different, mortal where they were immortal, limited where they were powerful? The creation was deemed a success. Humanity multiplied. They took over the work the lesser Anunnaki had been doing. They dug the canals, tended the fields, built the temples. The Anunnaki could now rest, could now enjoy the fruits of civilization without the burden of labour. All seemed well. But this was only the beginning of the story. Rest deeply now as we explore the world that emerged in those first generations after creation. This was a world unlike any that would come after the flood, a world of wonders and terrors, where gods walked openly among humans, where the supernatural was simply natural, where the boundaries we now take for granted had not yet hardened into place. The Anunnaki established their cities across the land. Each great deity had their own urban centre, their own temple complex, their own sphere of influence. These were not cities as we know them today, but something grander, more numinous. The cities of the gods were places where heaven and earth intersected, where the cosmic order was made manifest in stone and brick. Eridu, the city of Enki, was considered the oldest. Its foundation was laid at the very beginning, when the land itself was still soft and unformed. The temple there, the Iabzu, house of the cosmic ocean, was said to have been built over the very source of all fresh water, the place where the subterranean ocean, the Abzu, came closest to the surface. In the cool darkness of that temple, Enki sat upon his throne, surrounded by the sacred Mi, those mysterious objects of power that contained all knowledge. Nippur was the city of Enlil, the centre of the world, the place where all the gods gathered for council. The temple Eka rose there like a sacred mountain, its summit reaching toward the heavens, its foundations descending into the underworld. In Nippur, all divine decisions were made, all cosmic laws were decreed. To control Nippur was to control the fate of the world itself. Uruk, the city of Inanna, goddess of love and war, stood proud along the Euphrates. Here, beauty and terror intermingled. Inanna's temple, the Eanna, was adorned with lapis lazuli and gold. The goddess herself was capricious, passionate, dangerous. She could bless or destroy with equal ease. Her sacred prostitutes served in her temple, their unions considered holy, a reenactment of the cosmic marriage between heaven and earth. Let your consciousness drift through these ancient streets. See the ziggurats rising against the sky, their terraced sides painted in brilliant colours, red and blue and white, climbing in stages toward the heavens. Hear the chanting of priests in the temples, the bleating of sheep brought for sacrifice, the murmur of the marketplace where farmers bring their produce to trade. The humans of this age lived in close proximity to their creators. The Anunnaki were not distant or hidden. They appeared in their temples. They gave commands directly to their chosen servants. Kings ruled only because an Anunnaki lord granted them legitimacy. Priests spoke with the gods face to face, but this closeness also meant that humanity witnessed divine behaviour in all its complexity. The Anunnaki were not perfect moral exemplars. They had passions, jealousies, rivalries. They fought among themselves. They made mistakes. They changed their minds. The ancient texts preserve many stories of divine misbehaviour. Gods seduced mortal women. Goddesses fell in love with mortal men. Divine children were born of these unions, beings who were neither fully god nor fully human, but something in between. The ancient texts call them apkallo, or sage beings, individuals of extraordinary wisdom and power, who walked between worlds. Your body is completely at rest now, sinking deeper into sleep as we continue our journey through this antediluvian world. Humanity multiplied and spread across the earth. The descendants of those first 14 humans, those clay beings mixed with divine essence, filled the land between the rivers. They built more cities. They developed agriculture and animal husbandry. They invented writing and mathematics and astronomy. All of this, the ancient texts insist, was taught to them by the Anunnaki, particularly by Enki and his followers, the 7 sage beings who came before the flood. These 7 sages, the Apkallu, were semi-divine beings who served as intermediaries between gods and humans. Each was assigned to teach specific arts and sciences. One taught the proper rites of temple service, another taught the cultivation of grain, a third taught building and architecture. Together, they elevated humanity from crude beginnings to the heights of civilization. In the city of Sippar, the sun god Utu kept the tablets of divine knowledge. In the city of Lhasa, his twin sister Inanna held court. In Shuruppak, the goddess Ninlil, Enlil's consort, watched over her people. Each city was a small cosmos unto itself, a microcosm of the divine order ruled by a god or goddess, administered by human kings and priests who served as divine representatives. The king lists from this period, fragmentary though they are, preserve the names of these antediluvian rulers: Alulim, who ruled in Eridu for 8 periods or 28,000 years, depending on which version you read; Al-Algar, who ruled for 10 periods or 36,000 years; Enmenluana, Enmengalana, Dumuzi the shepherd, and so on, down through the generations. These enormous numbers have puzzled scholars for centuries. Some believe they represent actual years, suggesting that humans before the flood lived far longer than we do today. Others think the numbers are symbolic, or that they represent dynasties rather than individual reigns. But to the ancient scribes who recorded them, these were simply the facts, preserved with the same care given to any other historical data. Let your mind rest, your thoughts becoming as slow and peaceful as your breath, as we contemplate this long age before the flood. Centuries passed, millennia. The human population grew and grew, cities expanded, new settlements were established along the rivers and in the fertile plains. The earth became filled with human activity, human noise, human life, and this, according to the ancient texts, became a problem. The Atrahasis epic tells us that the noise of humanity disturbed the gods. Enlil in particular found himself unable to rest. The clamour of mankind has become oppressive, he complained to the other gods. Their noise disturbs my sleep. I cannot rest by day or by night for the tumult they make. This might seem petty, a god annoyed by noise, but the ancient texts hint at something deeper. Perhaps it was not mere sound that troubled Enlil, but the chaotic nature of humanity itself. Humans were unpredictable. They multiplied beyond control. They developed their own ideas, their own desires, their own plans. They were supposed to be servants, but they were becoming something more, something independent, and this independence threatened the cosmic order that Enlil existed to maintain. Enlil proposed solutions. First, he sent a plague to reduce the human population. The people cried out to Enki, their protector. Enki taught them the proper rituals and offerings to ward off the plague. The disease subsided. Humanity recovered and multiplied again. Enlil tried again, this time with drought. He withheld the rain. The rivers ran low, crops failed, famine stalked the land. Again. Humanity cried to Enki. Again. The clever god found a way to help them. He caused fish and other resources to emerge from the waters, sustaining humanity through the drought. Feel yourself drifting deeper, your consciousness like a leaf floating on the surface of a slow river, carried gently along as we approach the climax of this ancient story. Enlil grew more frustrated with each failed attempt to control humanity. The other Anunnaki watched and debated among themselves. Some sided with Enlil, agreeing that humanity had become too numerous, too noisy, too independent. Others, led by Enki, argued for mercy and patience. But Enlil was not finished. He had one more solution in mind, a final solution, a way to cleanse the earth of the human pestilence once and for all. He would send a flood. The decision was made in the Council of the Gods. Enlil proposed it. Anu agreed. The majority of the Anunnaki consented. A great deluge would be sent to destroy humanity. The earth would be washed clean. The noise would be silenced. Order would be restored. The gods swore an oath not to warn humanity of what was coming. They would tell no one. Humans would have no chance to prepare or escape. The flood would come upon them suddenly, without warning, and all would perish. But Enki, faithful Enki, could not bear to see his creation entirely destroyed. He had worked to create humanity. He had taught them and protected them. He would not abandon them now, even if it meant defying the will of the council. Yet he had sworn the oath. He could not directly tell any human what was coming. So Enki found a loophole. Your breathing is so gentle now, so peaceful, as we come to one of the most famous stories in all of ancient literature. There was a man in the city of Shuruppak named Atrahasis, which means exceedingly wise. In other versions of the story, of this same man is called Ziusudra or Utnapishtim. He was a righteous man, a king or priest, someone who had always served the gods faithfully. He was Enki's devoted follower. One night, Enki came to the wall of Atrahasis' house. He did not speak to the man directly, for that would violate his oath. Instead, he spoke to the wall, addressing the reed structure itself, but in a voice loud enough that anyone on the other side could hear. "Wall," said Enki to the wall, "Wall, I will speak to you. Hear my words. Read wall. Understand my instructions. Man of Shuruppak, you who stand on the other side, pay attention to what I say." And then, speaking to the wall, Enki described what was coming. He told the wall that a great flood would be sent to destroy all life. He told the wall that only one chance of survival existed, to build a boat, a great vessel that could ride out the coming waters. He told the wall the exact dimensions of this boat, the proper materials to use, how to seal it against water, and how much of each kind of living thing to bring aboard. Atrahasis heard all of this. He understood what was required. Immediately, he set to work. Imagine the scene now. As you drift peacefully toward deep sleep, Atrahasis gathering workers, explaining that he must build this enormous boat, this vessel unlike any ship they had ever seen. His neighbours thinking him mad. "A flood?" they asked. "The weather has been fine. The rivers are at their normal level. Why would we need a boat in the middle of the city?" But Atrahasis persisted. He followed Enki's instructions exactly. He cut timber from the mountains. He wove reeds. He coated the boat with pitch inside and out. He built rooms and compartments. He stocked it with food and water, and when it was ready, he brought his family aboard, and 2 of every kind of animal, just as Enki had instructed. The other Anunnaki did not know what Enki had done. They believed their oath held. They thought the coming flood would catch humanity completely unaware. Then the rains began. Let yourself imagine the deluge. Close your eyes, relax completely, and picture the ancient world as the skies opened and the waters came. At first, it was just rain, heavy rain, to be sure, but nothing that seemed catastrophic. The people of Shurapak looked up at the darkening sky and hurried indoors. They assumed it would pass, but it did not pass. The rain intensified, hour after hour, day after day. The water poured from the heavens. The rivers rose. The canals overflowed. Water began to flood through the streets. Still, people did not panic. They had weathered floods before. They climbed to higher ground, to the upper stories of their houses, to the top of the ziggurats. Surely the water would crest soon. Surely it would recede. But it did not recede. It kept rising. The ancient texts described the flood in terrifying detail. The heavens roared like a bull. Lightning split the sky. The earth itself seemed to shake with the force of the waters. Springs burst open in the ground, adding their waters to the deluge from above. The ocean rose, waves crashing inland, consuming the coastal cities. In 7 days and 7 nights, the world was transformed. The great cities of the antediluvian age, Eridu, Sippar, Shurapak, Lhasa, Bad Tibira, all were swallowed by the waters. The temples where gods had lived among men were submerged. The fields that had fed millions disappeared beneath the flood. Everything that humanity had built over thousands of years, all the monuments to civilization, all vanished into the depths. Your body is so deeply relaxed now, completely at peace, as we witness this ancient catastrophe from a place of calm observation. The Anunnaki themselves fled the flood. Though they were gods, they were not immune to its power. The texts describe them fleeing to the highest heavens, cowering like dogs, pressing themselves against the walls of heaven. Even divine beings felt fear. Inanna wept. "My people," she cried, "like fish they fill the sea." The mother goddess Ninhursag mourned with her. How could I agree to this in the council? How could I consent to the destruction of my creation? Even Enlil began to wonder if he'd gone too far. Looking down from heaven at the waters covering the entire earth, seeing the destruction, hearing the silence where once there had been human noise, he felt something like regret. Only Atrahasis and those in his boat survived. The vessel rode the waves, lifted high above the drowned world. Inside, in the darkness, the last humans huddled with the animals, listening to the roar of the storm, praying to Enki for deliverance, waiting for the waters to subside. Days passed, weeks. The rain finally stopped, but the waters did not immediately recede. The boat floated aimlessly on the endless sea that now covered the earth. There were no landmarks, no way to know where they were. The world they had known was gone. Finally, after many days, Atrahasis felt the boat shudder and settle. They had come to rest on something solid, a mountain peak that rose above the waters. Mount Nisir, the text tells us, the mountain of salvation. Atrahasis waited. 7 more days. Then he sent out a dove to see if the waters had receded enough for life to return. The dove flew out, circled, found nowhere to land, and returned to the boat. The world was still drowned. 7 more days. Another dove. The same result. 7 more days. This time, a raven. The raven flew out and did not return. It had found food. Carrion floating on the waters. The flood was receding. Finally, solid ground began to emerge. The boat came fully to rest. Atrahasis opened the door and looked out upon a transformed world. Let your consciousness drift peacefully as we observe this moment, this rebirth, this new beginning. Atrahasis descended from the boat. His feet touched earth, muddy and wet, but earth nonetheless. He knelt and kissed the ground. Then, following the instructions of Enki, he built an altar. He made a sacrifice to the gods, burning aromatic woods and offering the best portions of clean animals. The smell of the sacrifice rose toward heaven. The Anunnaki, still in the upper realms, smelled it and were drawn to it. The text says they gathered like flies around the offering. They were hungry. They were moved by Atrahasis' devotion. They realized that in destroying humanity, they had destroyed their own sustenance, their own servants, their own reason for being on earth. Enlil arrived at the sacrifice site and was furious. How did any human survive? Who violated the oath? Who warned this man? Enki stepped forward. He explained his stratagem, his clever solution that technically did not violate the oath. He had not directly warned Atrahasis. He had only spoken to a wall. The other gods saw the wisdom in Enki's action. Humanity should not be completely destroyed. The work still needed to be done. The gods still needed servants. A few humans, enough to restart civilization. This was better than total annihilation. But Enlil insisted on modifications. If humans are to continue, he declared, they must not live as long as they did before. Their years must be shortened. They must not multiply so rapidly. There must be natural checks on their population. Disease and death and infertility. They must never again become so numerous that they disturb our rest. And so it was decreed. The antediluvian age of incredibly long lifespans came to an end. Post-flood humanity would live much shorter lives, mere decades instead of centuries or millennia. The divine essence in their blood, that gift of Wheeler's sacrifice, would be diluted generation by generation. Humans would become more mortal, more distant from their divine origins, more limited in power and understanding. Atrahasis and his wife were an exception. For their faithfulness, for preserving life through the deluge, they were granted a special blessing. They would not die like normal humans. Instead, they were taken to a distant place, the mouth of the rivers, the far edge of the world, where they would live eternally, neither fully god nor fully human, but something in between. Your eyelids are so heavy now. You're breathing so slow and regular as we transition from the world before the flood to the world that came after. The waters receded slowly, month by month. The earth reappeared. The great plain between the Tigris and Euphrates, once covered by endless sea, gradually emerged from the depths. But it was a different world than before. The cities of the antediluvian age were buried under layers of mud and silt. The temples where gods had dwelt were ruins, if they could be found at all. The carefully constructed irrigation canals were choked with debris. The fields were barren, soaked in salt water, incapable of producing crops. Everything had to be rebuilt from scratch. The descendants of Atrahasis spread across the land. They were few at first, but over generations they multiplied. They rediscovered the arts of civilization, though much knowledge had been lost. They built new cities, often on the same sites as the old ones, drawing on the faint memories and legends of what had come before. The Anunnaki returned to Earth, but their presence was different now. They were more distant, less directly involved in daily human affairs. They still had their cities, their temples, their priests and rituals. Kings still claimed divine mandate to rule. But the easy familiarity of the antediluvian age was gone. A barrier had been erected between gods and humans, a consequence of the flood, a necessary distance. This post-flood world was the world known to the later Sumerians, the world they lived in and wrote about. When they composed their king lists, they drew a clear line. There were the kings who ruled before the flood, with their impossibly long reigns. Then the flood came. Then there were the kings who ruled after the flood, with much more reasonable lifespans and reign lengths. The first city to regain prominence after the flood was Kish. Its kings rebuilt civilization. They re-established trade. They codified laws, slowly, over centuries. The other cities rose again. Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, each built on the foundations of antediluvian predecessors, each preserving fragments of the ancient knowledge. Let your mind drift peacefully through these post-flood centuries. See the cities rising from the mud. Hear the sounds of construction, of life returning, of civilization being reborn. The world would never be the same as it was before the flood, but it would continue. Humanity would persist. The story would go on. As you rest now, completely relaxed, let us reflect on the meaning of these ancient stories. What were the Mesopotamians telling us about the Anunnaki, about the world before the flood, about the relationship between divine and human? At one level, these were historical accounts, or at least the ancient Mesopotamians believed them to be. They were not telling myths in the sense of made-up stories. They were preserving their sacred history, the true record of how the world came to be, how humanity was created, why things are the way they are. But these stories also operated on deeper levels. They explained the human condition. Why do we die? Because after the flood, the gods shortened our years. Why must we work hard to survive? Because we were created for that purpose. Why do we suffer? because we live in a world fundamentally shaped by divine decisions made long ago. The stories also establish social order. Kings ruled because the Anunnaki granted them authority. Priests served in temples because they maintained the connection between heaven and earth. The entire structure of Mesopotamian society was justified by these antediluvian accounts, and perhaps most profoundly, these stories wrestled with the nature of the divine. The Anunnaki were not presented as perfect beings. They made mistakes. They fought among themselves. They changed their minds. Enlil could be harsh. Enki could be deceptive, even when his deceptions were benevolent. The gods were powerful, vastly more powerful than humans, but they were not omnipotent or omnibenevolent in the way later monotheistic traditions would envision divinity. This made the gods more relatable in some ways. They had emotions humans could understand. They faced dilemmas and made choices. They were persons, not abstract forces. A farmer praying to Enlil for rain, or a mother praying to Ninhursag for a safe childbirth was speaking to someone. Not something. Someone who could understand human needs, even if divine priorities sometimes superseded them. Your breathing is so gentle now, so peaceful, carrying you deeper into restful sleep as we continue our contemplation. Let us turn our attention to the lost knowledge of the antediluvian age. The Mesopotamians believed that civilization before the flood had reached heights never equalled since. The 7 sages, those Apkallu sent by Enki, had taught humanity everything they needed to know. But much of this knowledge was lost in the flood, swept away with the drowned cities, preserved only in fragments. Later Mesopotamian kings obsessed over recovering this lost wisdom. They excavated the ruins of ancient cities, searching for tablets buried in the mud. They copied and recopied the oldest texts they could find, knowing these contained knowledge from before the deluge. The library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, created thousands of years after the flood, was largely an attempt to preserve whatever remained of antediluvian learning. What kind of knowledge did the ancients believe was lost? The texts hinted extraordinary things. There were the tablets of destiny, which controlled the fate of gods and humans alike. Possession of these tablets meant power over reality itself. Several myths describe gods or monsters stealing these tablets, and the cosmic chaos that resulted when the proper order was disrupted. There were the Emi, those mysterious objects kept by Enki in his Abzu temple. Each Mi represented some aspect of civilization: kingship, priesthood, writing, music, warfare, craftsmanship, and so on. In one famous myth, the goddess Inanna travels to Enki's temple, gets him drunk, and steals the Mi, bringing them to her city of Uruk. This was how civilization spread from its origin point to other cities. There were mathematical and astronomical texts of incredible sophistication. Modern scholars studying Mesopotamian mathematics have been astonished by what they discovered. The Babylonians used a base 60 number system, the same system that gives us 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. They could solve complex algebraic problems. They calculated the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable accuracy. The Mulapin tablets, astronomical compendiums, tracked the rising and setting of stars, the movements of planets, the cycles of the sun and moon. This knowledge was supposedly ancient even when the tablets were written, passed down from the antediluvian sages. There were medical texts describing hundreds of illnesses and their treatments, surgical procedures, herbal remedies, incantations to drive away demons of disease. The Mesopotamians viewed medicine as a combination of practical treatment and spiritual healing, both aspects taught by the Anunnaki. Let yourself imagine these ancient libraries, these repositories of antediluvian knowledge, great halls filled with clay tablets, scribes carefully copying texts thousands of years old, scholars debating the meaning of obscure passages. All of this was an attempt to reconnect with the wisdom of the world before the flood. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity continued to evolve in the centuries and millennia after the deluge. As time passed, the gods seemed to become even more distant. Their direct appearances became rarer. Communication happened more through dreams, omens, and divination rather than face-to-face encounters. This created a priestly class whose role was to interpret divine will. Priests learned to read the signs. They examined the livers of sacrificed animals, looking for irregularities that indicated divine messages. They studied the stars, understanding that the movements of celestial bodies reflected the intentions of celestial beings. They interpreted dreams, recognizing that the gods often spoke to humans while they slept. Everything was connected. The macrocosm of the heavens mirrored the microcosm of Earth. What happened in the divine realm would inevitably affect the human realm. Maintaining the proper rituals and offerings was essential to keeping this cosmic machinery running smoothly. The great temples became the center of Mesopotamian life. These were not just places of worship, but economic and political centers. The Temple of Enlil at Nippur controlled vast estates. It employed thousands of workers. It collected taxes and tributes from across Sumer. The High Priest of Nippur was one of the most powerful individuals in the world. Each temple followed the patterns supposedly established in the antediluvian age. The layout of the building, the order of rituals, the specific offerings required, all were based on ancient traditions. To deviate from these traditions was to risk divine anger. Kings went to great lengths to demonstrate their piety and connection to the Anunnaki. They built and rebuilt temples. They endowed priesthoods with land and wealth. They personally participated in the most important rituals. A king's legitimacy depended entirely on divine approval, on the belief that an Anunnaki lord had chosen him to rule. Your body is so deeply relaxed now, every muscle loose and comfortable, your mind drifting peacefully through these ancient times. Let us consider some of the great kingdoms that rose after the flood, kingdoms that saw themselves as inheritors of the antediluvian legacy. The city of Uruk, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, produced some of the most famous rulers of ancient Mesopotamia, Enmerkar, Lugalbanda, and most famously, Gilgamesh. These kings were considered semi-divine, descended from unions between Anunnaki and humans. They possessed greater strength, wisdom, and longevity than ordinary mortals, though they were not fully divine like the Anunnaki themselves. Gilgamesh, in particular, became the subject of elaborate legends. He was said to be 2/3 god and 1/3 human, born of the goddess Ninsun and a mortal father. His epic journey, his quest for immortality after the death of his friend Enkidu, his encounter with the flood survivor Tunapishtim. All of these stories connected the post-flood world back to the antediluvian age. When Gilgamesh sought eternal life, Utnapishtim told him it was impossible. The secret of immortality had been lost with the flood. The gods had decreed that post-flood humanity would be mortal. Even a great king like Gilgamesh could not escape this fate. The best he could hope for was to be remembered, to leave a legacy that would outlast his physical body. This was a profound shift from the antediluvian perspective. Before the flood, the boundary between mortal and immortal was more permeable. Humans lived for thousands of years. They could be elevated to divine status. After the flood, these possibilities were closed off. Mortality became absolute, inescapable. Yet the connection to the Anunnaki remained. Kings still claimed divine parentage. Heroes were still born of unions between gods and mortals. The blood of the Anunnaki, though diluted, still flowed in human veins, especially in the veins of rulers and heroes. The city of Ur rose to prominence under the Third Dynasty, creating an empire that stretched across Mesopotamia. Its most famous king, Ur-Nammu, created one of the earliest law codes, establishing justice as a divine mandate. He built ziggurats throughout his realm, each one a mountain house connecting earth to heaven, each one a reminder that human society existed within a cosmic order, established by the Anunnaki. The city of Babylon would eventually surpass all others. Under Hammurabi, it became the political and cultural center of Mesopotamia. Hammurabi's law code, more extensive than Ur-Nammu's, claimed to be divinely inspired, granted by the sun god Shamash, who was himself one of the Anunnaki. Justice was not a human invention, but a gift from the gods, part of the antediluvian knowledge preserved and transmitted through the generations. Rest peacefully as we explore the religious life of these kingdoms. The religious calendar of Mesopotamia was complex and deeply connected to astronomical observation. Each month was dedicated to particular deities. Each season had its festivals and rituals. The New Year, celebrated in spring, was the most important time of all. The Akitu festival in Babylon lasted 12 days. It reenacted the cosmic battle between order and chaos. The statue of Marduk, Babylon's patron god, was paraded through the streets. The king participated in a ritual where he was symbolically stripped of his power. then reinvested with authority by the gods. This reminded everyone that kingship was a divine gift, not a human right. During the festival, the Enuma Elish was recited, the epic of creation that told how Marduk defeated the chaos monster Tiamat and created the world from her corpse. This story connected the present moment back to the very beginning, to the time when the Anunnaki first brought order out of chaos. Every major temple had its own cycle of daily rituals. The statue of the deity was treated as a living being. It was awakened with morning hymns. It was washed and dressed. It was offered food and drink. Musicians played for it. Incense burned before it. All of this was necessary to maintain the god's presence in the temple. The Mesopotamians did not think of their deity statues as mere representations. The statue was the god in a very real sense. Through proper ritual, the divine essence was summoned into the image. The god literally inhabited the statue, saw through its eyes, heard through its ears. To neglect the statue was to neglect the god, with potentially catastrophic consequences. Priests learned elaborate procedures for caring for divine images. They knew the exact words to say, the precise movements to make, the proper materials to use. All of this knowledge supposedly descended from the antediluvian age, taught by the Apkallu, preserved through careful transmission from master to apprentice. Let your breathing become slower still, deeper, more peaceful, as we contemplate these ancient practices. But what of the Anunnaki themselves in these later ages? Where were they? Did they still dwell on Earth? Or had they withdrawn to the heavens? The texts give ambiguous answers. On one hand, the gods still needed to be fed. The sacrifices and offerings were not symbolic but literal sustenance. This suggested ongoing divine presence and dependence on humanity. On the other hand, direct divine appearances became increasingly rare as time went on. The gods spoke through omens and dreams rather than face to face. This suggested growing distance. Some texts hint at divine weariness. The gods tired of Earth. They tired of humanity and its constant needs. They retreated more and more to the heavenly realms, leaving only minimal presence in their earthly temples. Human priests became increasingly important as intermediaries, as those who could bridge the growing gap between divine and mortal. Yet the gods could not fully abandon Earth. The cosmic order required their maintenance. The cycles of nature, the succession of seasons, the rising and setting of celestial bodies, all of this was divine work. If the Anunnaki completely withdrew, chaos would return. Tiamat would rise again. The world would dissolve back into primordial waters, so a balance was maintained. The gods remained, but at a distance. They intervened when absolutely necessary, but left day-to-day affairs increasingly to humans and their intermediaries. This created anxiety. How could humanity be sure they were still pleasing the gods? How could they know they were maintaining the proper rituals and offerings? What if some crucial detail had been forgotten? Some important practice from the antediluvian age lost in the flood? This anxiety drove the obsessive preservation of texts, the careful copying of ancient tablets, the reverent excavation of ruins. Every scrap of knowledge from before the flood was precious beyond measure. It represented a connection to the time when gods and humans lived in closer harmony. Your consciousness drifts peacefully, like a boat on calm waters, as we near the end of our journey through these ancient times. The legacy of the Anunnaki and the antediluvian age extended far beyond Mesopotamia. As civilizations developed throughout the ancient Near East, they carried flood stories with them. They told of a time before the Great Deluge when the world was different, when gods walked among humans, when life was longer and knowledge was greater. The biblical flood story, the account of Noah and the Ark, is clearly related to the Mesopotamian versions. The details differ, but the core narrative is the same. A righteous man warned by God, a great boat built to specific dimensions, animals brought aboard in pairs, a worldwide flood that destroys all other life, the boat coming to rest on a mountain, birds sent out to find dry land, a sacrifice offered after the waters recede. Biblical tradition also preserved the concept of extraordinary longevity before the flood. The genealogies in Genesis list patriarchs who lived for centuries. Methuselah lived 969 years. Noah lived 950 years. After the flood, lifespans rapidly decreased. Just as in the Mesopotamian accounts, Greek tradition remembered giants and heroes of old. beings born of unions between gods and mortals, who lived in a golden age before a great catastrophe. The Titans and the age before Zeus mirrored the Anunnaki and the antediluvian period. Egyptian tradition spoke of the time when the gods themselves ruled as pharaohs, before handing power to mortal kings. The divine dynasties listed in their king lists paralleled the antediluvian rulers of Mesopotamia. Across the ancient world, cultures preserved memories of a lost golden age, a time of closer divine human contact, ended by catastrophe, remembered with nostalgia and longing. Modern archaeology has found evidence of massive flooding events in Mesopotamia. Thick layers of water-deposited clay separate earlier occupation levels from later ones at several ancient sites. Whether these local floods became the basis for the flood story, or whether the story preserves memory of a larger catastrophe, remains debated. But the ancient people who wrote these texts believed they were recording actual history. Let these ancient memories wash over you now, soothing you, carrying you deeper into peaceful rest. As we conclude our journey through the kingdoms before the flood, as we prepare to leave you to your peaceful slumber, let us reflect once more on what these ancient stories meant, and perhaps still mean. The Anunnaki represented humanity's attempt to understand the cosmos and their place within it. The world was not random or meaningless. It had been intentionally created. Human beings had a purpose, even if that purpose was sometimes difficult to accept. We were made to serve, but also to flourish within proper bounds. The flood represented the consequences of exceeding those bounds. When humanity became too numerous, too noisy, too independent, cosmic correction became necessary. The world was reset. But the reset was not complete annihilation. A remnant survived. Civilization continued. The story went on. This pattern of destruction and preservation, of divine judgment tempered by divine mercy, became fundamental to how Mesopotamians understood history. Kingdoms rose and fell, cities were built and destroyed, but always there was continuity, always a thread connecting present to past to the very beginning. The antediluvian age functioned as a golden age that could never be fully recovered, but also could never be completely forgotten. It was paradise lost, but its memory provided hope. If civilization had reached such heights before, perhaps it could again. If the gods had once walked openly among humans, perhaps they might do so again. If wisdom had been given from heaven in the past, perhaps more wisdom might yet descend. Every king who ruled after the flood claimed to be restoring the glory of the antediluvian age. Every temple rebuilt was attempting to recreate the perfection of the original temples. Every copy of an ancient text was an act of preservation and reverence for knowledge granted by the Anunnaki. This backward-looking orientation might seem strange to modern sensibilities. We think of progress as moving forward into new knowledge and capabilities. The Mesopotamians thought of progress as recovering what had been lost, as approaching closer to the perfection that existed at the beginning. Yet perhaps these are not so different. Both represent human aspiration towards something greater than the present moment. Both acknowledge that we are not yet what we could be. Both look beyond the immediate for sources of wisdom and guidance. Your breathing is so slow now, so peaceful, your body completely at rest, your mind drifting in the space between waking and sleep. Let yourself imagine once more the world before the flood, the great cities rising from the plains, the ziggurats climbing toward heaven, the gardens and fields stretching to the horizon, the rivers flowing with abundance, the gods walking among humans, the sages teaching wisdom, the kings ruling for thousands of years. See it clearly in your mind's eye, this lost world, this golden age. Feel its peace, its order, its sense of purpose and meaning. And then, let it go. Let it sink beneath the waters. Let the flood come. Let everything be washed away. But know that it is not truly lost. It is preserved in memory, in stories, in texts copied and recopied through millennia, in ruins buried beneath desert sands, in the shape of human civilization itself, which still bears the imprint of those ancient patterns. The Anunnaki may have withdrawn to the heavens, the antediluvian age may have ended forever, but the connection remains. The thread is unbroken, from the first human shaped from clay and divine essence to you. Here, now, drifting towards sleep, the line continues. You carry within you the breath of the gods. You're descended from those who survived the flood. You're heir to the wisdom taught by the 7 sages. You are part of a story that began at the very beginning and continues even now. Rest in that knowledge. Let it comfort you. Let it carry you into peaceful dreams. The silence of deep sleep surrounds you now, but within that silence, the ancient world still whispers. There is more to the story of the Anunnaki, more to understand about the kingdoms before the flood, more mysteries waiting to be explored as you drift deeper into restful slumber. Let your body sink even further into your bed. Feel yourself becoming weightless, floating, suspended between earth and heaven, just as the antediluvian world existed in that liminal space where divine and mortal realms touched. We return now to the time before the flood, to explore aspects of that world we have not yet fully considered. The daily life of humans living under the direct rule of the Anunnaki, the structures of their society, the nature of their cities, the texture of existence in an age when gods were not distant abstractions but present realities. Imagine waking in the city of Eridu on a morning 5,000 years before the flood. The sun rises over the marshlands, its light catching the waters of the canals that crisscross the city. The air is cool and fresh. Birds call from the reed beds. In the distance, the great ziggurat of Enki rises like a mountain, its sides painted in brilliant blue and white, symbolic of the waters over which Enki rules. You are a farmer, perhaps, or a craftsman. Your family has lived in Eridu for generations beyond counting. Your ancestors helped build the first temple here, back when the city was newly founded, when Enki himself walked these streets and gave instructions for every detail of construction. You rise from your sleeping mat. Your house is simple but comfortable. Mud brick walls, a flat roof where you sometimes sleep on hot nights, a central courtyard open to the sky. Your wife is already awake, grinding grain for the morning meal. Your children sleep still, peaceful in the early dawn. Before you eat, you perform your morning devotions. In the corner of your courtyard stands a small shrine, a clay figurine representing Enki. You pour a libation of water, offer a small cake, you whisper a prayer. Lord of wisdom, Lord of the sweet waters, bless this house. Grant us health and prosperity. Protect us from evil. This is not mere ritual. The god might actually hear you. The god might actually respond. In this age before the flood, such things are possible, even commonplace. Let yourself feel the texture of this life, so different from your own, yet recognizably human in its basic concerns and rhythms. After your morning meal, you leave your house and walk through the streets of Eridu toward your work. The city is waking around you, other families emerging from their homes, shopkeepers opening their stalls in the marketplace, farmers driving their sheep and goats toward the fields outside the city walls. The streets are narrow, winding between buildings. Some are paved with baked brick, the best technology of the age. Others are simply packed earth. Channels for drainage run along the sides, carrying wastewater away to the canals. You pass a bakery. The smell of fresh bread fills the air. The baker, a woman named Nin Allah, waves to you. Her family has run this bakery for 7 generations. She learned the craft from her mother, who learned it from her mother, and so on back through time. The recipe for the bread comes from the antediluvian period, supposedly given to the first baker by Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing and baking. Everything in this world has divine origins. Every craft, every skill, every bit of knowledge can be traced back to one of the Anunnaki or their sage servants. Humanity did not develop these things on their own. They were gifts, teachings, revelations. You reach the workshop where you spend your days. You are a potter, a maker of vessels. Clay is your medium, the same substance from which the first humans were formed. There is something sacred in this, in taking formless earth and shaping it into useful objects. You whisper a quick prayer to Ninhursag, the mother goddess who shaped the first humans, asking her to guide your hands. The workshop is cool and dim. Shelves line the walls, filled with completed pots and bowls and jars waiting to be fired. In the centre, your wheel. You settle yourself before it. Taking a lump of wet clay from the bin, you begin to spin the wheel, your hands finding the centre of the clay, drawing it up, shaping it. This skill took years to learn. Your master taught you, just as his master taught him. The techniques go back to the very beginning, to when one of the 7 sages first showed humans how to work clay into vessels. As you work, your mind wanders. You think about the upcoming festival. In 3 days, there will be a great celebration at the temple. The statue of Enki will be paraded through the streets. There will be feasting and music. The god might appear, might actually manifest before the assembled people. Such things have happened before. You think about your son, who shows promise. He might be selected for scribal training, to become a scribe, to master the art of writing. This would elevate your entire family. Scribes are essential to the functioning of society. They keep records, they copy sacred texts, they serve in the temples and palaces. It is a great honour. Writing itself is a gift from the gods. Nabu, a scribe of the gods, taught humans how to press wedge-shaped marks into wet clay, creating signs that could preserve speech, thoughts, knowledge. Before writing, everything had to be remembered. Now it could be recorded, transmitted across generations without loss or distortion. Let these thoughts flow through you, these glimpses of life before the flood, as you sink deeper into peaceful rest. The morning passes. The sun climbs higher. The heat begins to build. You complete several vessels, setting them aside to dry before firing. Your apprentice, a young man from a neighbouring family, works beside you. You correct his technique, showing him how to thin the walls more evenly, how to create a more graceful curve. Teaching is sacred work. Knowledge must be passed from generation to generation. Each master has a responsibility to train the next. This is how civilization persists, how the gifts of the Anunnaki are preserved and extended. At midday, you break for a meal, bread and beer, the staples of Mesopotamian diet. The beer is thick and nutritious, made from barley, another gift from the gods. Your wife brings the food to the workshop. You eat together in the courtyard, enjoying the brief respite from labour. After the meal, your wife returns home and you return to your wheel. But before you can resume work, you hear a commotion in the street, voices raised in excitement, people running. You step outside to see what is happening. A messenger has come from the temple. The high priest requires a special vessel for tomorrow's ritual. A large jar, decorated with particular symbols, made from the finest clay. It is an honour to be chosen for such a commission, but also a challenge. The work must be perfect. Any flaw might offend the god. You accept the commission. The messenger describes exactly what is needed. You make mental notes, already planning how you will execute the work. This will require your finest clay, your best techniques, your complete concentration. You spend the rest of the afternoon on this special piece. Your hands move with practiced skill, but also with heightened awareness. This jar will be used in a sacred ritual. It will be handled by priests. It might even be touched by the god himself, if Enki chooses to manifest during the ceremony. As the sun begins to set, you complete the jar. It is beautiful, if you may say so yourself. The proportions are perfect. The decorations, pressed into the wet clay with a carved seal, are crisp and clear. The whole piece radiates a sense of rightness, of fitness for its sacred purpose. You set it carefully aside to dry overnight. Tomorrow you will fire it. The day after, you will deliver it to the temple. You clean your workspace and your tools. You wash your hands in the basin by the door. Then you make your way home through the cooling evening air. The streets of Eridu are different at night. Torches burn at intervals, casting flickering shadows. The gates in the city wall are closed and guarded. Inside the walls, people gather in small groups, talking, laughing, sharing the events of the day. You reach your home. Your family is waiting. Your wife has prepared the evening meal. Your children are excited, chattering about something they saw in the marketplace. Your eldest daughter describes a travelling musician who performed, singing songs about the deeds of the gods. You eat together, the whole family, sitting in the courtyard under the emerging stars. This is a peaceful time, a time of connection and rest. The work of the day is done. Tomorrow will bring new tasks. But for now, there is just this moment of domestic tranquility. After the meal, you tell your children a story. It is one passed down in your family, about your ancestor who lived many generations ago. This ancestor was a master craftsman who once made vessels for Enki's temple. One day, the god himself appeared and praised the ancestor's work as a blessing. Enki granted that the skill of pottery would remain in the family line, passed from parent to child as long as they maintained proper devotion. Your children listen with wide eyes. They have heard this story many times before, but they never tire of it. It connects them to their past, to their purpose, to the divine favour that makes their family special. After the story, you lead your family in evening prayers. You pour libations to the household gods. You offer thanks for the day's blessings. You ask for protection through the night. Then, finally, you retire to your sleeping mat. Your wife lies beside you. Your children settle in their corner of the room. The house grows quiet. Outside, the city sleeps. The stars wheel overhead. The great temple of Enki rises dark against the night sky. And you, comfortable and tired, drift towards sleep, secure in the knowledge that you live in a world ordered by the gods, a world with meaning and purpose, a world that will continue as it has always been. Except, it will not continue. The flood is coming. But you do not know this. No one knows, except the gods themselves, and one righteous man to whom Enki will whisper a warning. For now, tonight, the world before the flood continues in peaceful ignorance of its approaching doom. Let yourself rest in this moment, this last age of innocence, before everything changes. We shift now to a different perspective. Let us enter the temple itself, the great house of Enki, and observe the world of the priests who mediate between gods and humans. The high priest of Enki's temple is named Enmedur-Ana. His name means Lord of the Me, the duration of heaven and earth. He is not merely a religious figure but one of the most powerful men in the world. The temple owns vast estates. It employs thousands of workers. It controls the distribution of grain and other resources. The high priest oversees all of this, but his primary duty is to maintain the connection between Enki and his people. Enmedur-Ana rises before dawn every day. His first duty is to awaken the god. He enters the inner sanctum of the temple, a place where only the highest priests may go. Here stands the statue of Enki, carved from precious wood, overlaid with gold and lapis lazuli, adorned with jewels. The statue's eyes are made from white shell and black stone, giving it an eerily lifelike appearance. The high priest approaches reverently. He kneels before the statue. He recites the ancient words, the formula that has been used since the very first temple was built. Great Enki, Lord of the Abzu, Awakener of Morning, arise. Your city awaits you. Your people need your blessing. Open your eyes upon us. As he speaks, he performs the ritual actions. He unveils the statue, removing the cloth that covered it overnight. He opens the shutters in the sanctuary, allowing the first light of dawn to enter. He places fresh offerings before the statue, bread and beer and dates, the finest products of the land. Sometimes, rarely but occasionally, the god responds. The statue's eyes might seem to move. A breath of wind might stir through the sealed chamber. A voice might speak, or seem to speak, in the priest's mind. These are moments of awe and terror, when the boundary between mortal and divine grows thin. But most days, there is only silence. The ritual is performed, the offerings are made, and the high priest trusts that the god is present, is listening, is accepting the service offered. Let your breathing slow even more, your consciousness drifting through these sacred spaces, these moments of devotion. After awakening the god, Enmedur-Ana oversees the morning rituals. Lesser priests wash the statue with sacred water drawn from the Abzu, the cosmic ocean beneath the earth. They dress it in fresh linen garments. They adorn it with jewellery. They anoint it with fragrant oils. Musicians enter the sanctuary. They play harps and drums and flutes. They sing hymns composed in the earliest days, songs that praise Enki's wisdom, his generosity, his protection of humanity. Lord of the universe, primordial one of heaven and earth, self-reliant, Father Enki, engendered by a bull, begotten by a wild bull, cherished by Enlil the Great Mountain, beloved by Holy Anne, king, mess tree planted in the Abzu, rising over all lands, great lion of the sacred Lagash. When you lift your eyes, they tremor. The hymn continues, verse after verse, describing the god's attributes and deeds. The priests sing in unison, their voices echoing through the temple chambers. This is not mere entertainment. The hymns themselves have power. They remind the god of his nature. They reinforce the cosmic order. They maintain the connection between heaven and earth. While the morning rituals are performed, other priests go about their various duties. The temple is like a small city within the city. There are administrators who keep records. There are craftsmen who maintain the building and create ritual objects. There are farmers who work the temple's fields. There are shepherds who tend the temple's flocks. All of this activity serves the god. The temple is Enki's household. Just as a great king requires servants and administrators, so too does a god. The offerings brought to the temple, the grain and animals and precious goods, these are not symbolic. They are the god's food, the god's wealth, the god's due as ruler and protector. Enmedu-Rana oversees it all. He reviews the accounts brought by administrators. He adjudicates disputes among temple workers. He receives messengers from other cities. He consults with the king of Eridu on matters of state. But his most important duty, beyond all the administrative tasks, is to maintain communication with Enki. The high priest is the primary channel through which the god's will is made known to humanity. This happens in various ways, sometimes in dreams. The god sends visions to the priest, sometimes through divination. The priest learns the god's intentions by reading signs. Sometimes, very rarely, in direct conversation, the god manifests and speaks. Today, Enmedu-Rana has been troubled by a dream. In the dream, he saw water rising. He saw the city of Eridu submerged. He saw the temple sinking beneath waves. He woke in distress, uncertain what this vision meant. Is it a warning? A prophecy? Or merely the product of his own anxious mind? He decides to perform divination. He will sacrifice a sheep and examine its liver. The patterns in the organ, the shapes and colours and anomalies, these will reveal the god's message. Let yourself watch, relaxed and peaceful, as the ancient ritual unfolds. The sheep is brought to the temple courtyard. It is a perfect specimen, white fleece, no blemishes, exactly as required for an important divination. The animal is calm, as if it understands its sacred purpose. Enmedu-Rana washes his hands, he recites prayers, he places his hands on the sheep's head, symbolically transferring the question to the animal. Great Enki, Lord of Wisdom, I ask you, what does my dream portend? Show me the truth in the liver of this sheep. The animal is quickly and skillfully slaughtered. Its blood is collected in a bowl. Its body is opened, the liver, seat of life and emotion in Mesopotamian thought, is carefully removed. The high priest examines it closely. He is trained in this art. He knows the meanings of every marking, every variation. The liver is like a map, each region corresponding to some aspect of divine will or cosmic order. He sees immediately that something is wrong. The liver is marked in unusual ways. Certain lobes are discoloured. There is a hardness in the gallbladder. These are not good signs. He consults the omen tablets, ancient texts that catalogue thousands of liver configurations and their meanings. If the gallbladder is hard and the markings of the palace area are darkened, a great destruction approaches. Water will rise. The land will be flooded. Enmedu-Rana's hands tremble as he reads. His dream was not random anxiety. It was a warning. Something terrible is coming. But what can be done? If the gods have decreed a flood, how can mortal men prevent it? He must consult with Enki directly. He must seek guidance. He returns to the inner sanctum. He prostrates himself before the statue. Lord Enki, Master, I have seen the signs. A great flood is coming. What would you have us do? How can we prepare? How can we be saved? Silence. The statue stands motionless. The god does not answer, at least not in words. But as Enmedu-Rana remains prostrate, his consciousness altered by ritual and fasting and intense focus, he begins to perceive something. Not a voice, exactly, but an impression, a sense of the god's intention. Not all will be saved. The flood is necessary. It has been decreed by the council of the gods. The earth must be cleansed, but a remnant will survive. One man, one family, has been chosen. They will be warned. They will be saved. And through them, Humanity will continue. This is not what Enmedarana hoped to hear. He wanted a way to save everyone, to prevent the catastrophe. But he understands that he cannot change what the gods have decided. He can only accept and trust that their wisdom exceeds his own. He rises from his prostration. He leaves the sanctuary. He goes to his private chamber and sits in the darkness, contemplating what he has learned. Should he warn people? Should he tell them what is coming? But the god has not authorized this. The god has said only that one man will be saved. To speak of the flood publicly would cause panic, chaos, would perhaps interfere with divine plans. So Enmedarana keeps silent. He continues his daily duties. He performs the rituals. He administers the temple. And he waits, watching the sky, watching the rivers, waiting for the first signs of the coming deluge. Let this scene fade now. Let it dissolve into darkness as you drift deeper into sleep. Time passes in the world before the flood. Days become weeks, weeks become months, months become years. The divine decree has been made, but its execution is not yet at hand. The world continues, unaware of its approaching doom. We turn now to a third perspective, to the palace of the king. For the cities of the antediluvian age were not ruled by priests alone, but by kings who claimed divine mandate, who served as the earthly representatives of the Anunnaki. The king of Eridu at this time is named Alulim. According to the later king lists, he is the very first king, the one to whom kingship was first lowered from heaven. Whether this is historically accurate in any sense we can understand, or whether it represents some deeper symbolic truth, we cannot say. But this is what the ancient texts tell us. Alulim rules from his palace near the centre of the city. The building is large and impressive, though modest compared to the great palaces that will be built in later ages. Its walls are thick mud brick. Its rooms open onto central courtyards. Its roof is flat, suitable for sleeping on hot nights or for observing the stars. The king rises early, like the high priest. His first duty is also to the gods, but his approach is different. Where the priest maintains ritual and connection, the king exercises power and authority. Both are necessary. Both are divinely ordained. Alulim's day begins with audience. Citizens come to him with disputes that need resolution. A farmer claims his neighbour has diverted water from a canal, stealing irrigation that rightfully belongs to another field. Two brothers quarrel over their inheritance. A merchant accuses another of fraud. The king listens to each case. He asks questions. He considers the evidence. Then he renders judgment. His decisions are not arbitrary. They are based on precedent, on custom, on the principles of justice taught by the gods. The sun god Utu is the divine judge, the one who sees all, who weighs truth against falsehood. The human king tries to mirror this divine justice in his rulings. You, Alulim says to the farmer who diverted the canal, will restore the water flow to its proper channel. You will compensate your neighbour with grain for the crops that suffered. If you disobey, you will be expelled from the city. Justice must be maintained. The farmer bows low. He accepts the judgment. This is not tyranny, but legitimate authority. The king speaks with the voice of the gods. To disobey the king is to disobey the cosmic order itself. After hearing cases, Alulim meets with his advisors. There are matters of state to discuss. The city's granaries are full, but should more storage be built in anticipation of future need? The walls require maintenance in several sections. When should this work be scheduled? A delegation from the city of Bad Tibira has arrived, seeking to negotiate a trade agreement. How should they be received? The king considers each issue carefully. His decisions will affect the lives of thousands of people. The weight of responsibility is heavy, but he bears it willingly. This is what it means to be king, to rule not for one's own benefit, but for the good of the people, under the watchful eyes of the gods. Let yourself observe this ancient court, these deliberations, as your consciousness continues to drift peacefully. In the afternoon, Alulim performs his most sacred duty. He will make offerings at the temple. The king and the high priest work together, two aspects of the same divine order. The priest maintains the daily connection with the gods. The king demonstrates through his actions that all political authority ultimately derives from divine will. Alulim dresses in his finest robes. He wears the royal crown. a simple but significant marker of his status. He is accompanied by courtiers and guards as he processes through the city streets toward the temple. People bow as he passes. Children stare in wonder. This is their king, chosen by the gods, responsible for their welfare and safety. He is not merely a man, but a living symbol of divine order made manifest in human society. At the temple, Enmedurana waits to receive him. The two men, king and priest, greet each other with formal courtesy. They have worked together for many years. They respect each other, though their duties often pull them in different directions. The priest focuses on the sacred. The king must balance the sacred with the practical. Together they enter the temple. Together they approach the sanctuary of Enki. The king brings his offerings, animals for sacrifice, precious goods for the temple treasury, grain from the royal estates. These are not tribute but partnership. The king serves the god legitimizes the king. The relationship is reciprocal. Enmedurana performs the sacrifice. Blood flows, incense burns, prayers are chanted. Alulim stands with bowed head, participating in the ritual, reaffirming his dedication to the divine order. When the ritual is complete, the two men retire to a private chamber. Here they can speak freely, away from courtiers and lesser priests. The signs are troubling, Enmedurana says quietly. I have performed divinations. I have consulted the omens. Something is coming. Something terrible. Alulim listens intently. What have the gods revealed? A great destruction. Water rising. The land flooded. I don't know when, or how extensive, but the warning is clear. The king is silent for a long moment. Can we prepare? Can we warn the people? I do not know. The god has not authorized such warnings. One man will be saved. I have perceived this much. Beyond that, I cannot say. Alulim struggles with this information. As king, his duty is to protect his people, but if the gods have decreed destruction, what can mortal efforts accomplish? We must trust in the wisdom of the gods, he says finally. If they have a plan, we cannot see the whole of it. We can only do our duty, maintain order, serve faithfully and accept what comes. Enmedurana nods. Yes, this is all we can do. The two men sit in silence, weighted by knowledge they cannot share, burdened by responsibility they cannot escape. Outside, the city continues its daily life, ignorant of the doom approaching. Inside this chamber, two men carry the heavy secret and wait. Let this scene fade as well, dissolving into the peaceful darkness of deep sleep. We return to the perspective of the gods themselves, to the councils in heaven where the fate of the world is decided. This requires imagination, for who can truly conceive of what it would be like to be divine? But the ancient texts attempt to describe these scenes, and we can follow their guidance. The great gods gather in Enlil's chamber in Nippur. Anu has descended from the highest heaven for this council. Enlil presides. Enki attends, though he has reservations about what is being proposed. Ninhursag is present, so are many others. Ninurta the warrior, Nanna the moon god, Utu the sun god, Inanna the goddess of love and war. Dozens of divine beings, each with their own perspectives and interests. The chamber where they meet exists simultaneously in the earthly temple and in the heavenly realm. It is a liminal space, a point where different planes of reality intersect. To mortal eyes, it would appear as simply an empty room in the temple, but to divine perception, it is a vast hall, filled with light and power, where the fundamental forces of existence take visible form. The time has come, Enlil declares. His voice is like thunder, authoritative, absolute. Humanity has become too numerous. Their noise disturbs the cosmic order. We must act. They have done nothing wrong, Enki protests. They serve us faithfully. They maintain the temples. They make offerings. Why should they be destroyed for simply existing? It is not punishment, Enlil responds. It is necessity. The balance must be maintained. When one element grows too dominant, correction is required. This is the nature of cosmic order. I created them, Enki insists. They are my responsibility. I cannot simply allow their destruction. You created them to serve, Enlil counters. They have exceeded their purpose. They have become a problem rather than a solution. Ninhursag speaks then. her voice quieter but no less powerful. I too shaped them from clay. I too feel responsibility for their existence. Is there no way to reduce their numbers without complete annihilation? I have tried other methods, Enlil says. Plague, drought. Nothing has worked. Enki always finds a way to circumvent divine will. The only solution is a complete cleansing, a flood that will wash away the problem entirely. Let yourself float in this cosmic space, this divine council, as you drift deeper into sleep. The debate continues. Various gods offer their perspectives. Some side with Enlil. Humanity has indeed become too numerous, too chaotic. Some side with Enki. The creation should not be destroyed so lightly. Others remain neutral, willing to accept whatever the council decides. Finally, Anu speaks. As the supreme god, his word carries ultimate authority. A flood will be sent. This is decreed. But Enki's concerns are not without merit. Total destruction serves no purpose. A remnant will be preserved. One family, carefully chosen. They will survive. Through them, humanity will continue, but chastened, reduced, more aware of their proper place in the cosmic order. It is decided then. The flood will come, but it will not be absolute extinction. This compromise satisfies no one completely, but it is acceptable to all. Swear an oath, Enlil demands. Swear that you will not warn humanity of what is coming. They must not prepare. They must not attempt to escape. Only the chosen remnant, designated after the flood has begun, will survive. The gods take the oath. Each one swears in turn. Even Enki, reluctantly, swears that he will not directly tell any human what is coming. But as he swears, Enki is already planning. His oath forbids him from directly warning humans, but there are indirect methods. There are loopholes. There are ways to serve both the letter of the oath and the needs of his creation. The council dissolves. The gods return to their various domains. Enlil begins preparations for the flood, calling upon the storm powers at his command. Gathering the waters of heaven and earth, Enki returns to his Abzu, to his house of wisdom, and considers how he might save more than just one family. In heaven, the machinery of destruction begins to turn. On earth, life continues normally. No one knows what is coming. No one can prepare. The gap between divine knowledge and human ignorance is absolute, but time continues to pass. The preparations take time, even for gods. Months become years. Years become decades. The flood will come, but not yet. Not yet. Let the divine realm fade from your awareness now. Let your consciousness return to the human level, to the cities of the antediluvian world, to the lives of those who do not yet know their doom approaches. We visit now the city of Shurupak, where Atrahasis lives. This is the man who will be saved, though he does not know it yet. This is the righteous one whom Enki has chosen, though no warning has yet been given. Atrahasis is not a king, though some versions of the story make him one. In the earliest accounts, he is simply a devout man, a follower of Enki, someone who has always maintained proper worship, who has always lived righteously. He is neither young nor old. He has a wife, children. He owns land, works with his hands. He is prosperous enough to be comfortable, but not so wealthy as to be corrupted by excess. In every way, he's a model of what humanity should be. Atrahasis's daily life is similar to the potter we visited earlier in Eridu. He rises at dawn, he prays, he works, he provides for his family, he participates in the community, he makes offerings at the temple, he treats others fairly, he speaks truth, he honours the gods. There is nothing particularly dramatic about his life, no heroic deeds, no great accomplishments, simply steady, faithful living, day after day, year after year. This is what has attracted divine attention, not spectacular virtue, but consistent devotion. Atrahasis has begun to have dreams recently, strange dreams, disturbing dreams. In these dreams, he sees water, rising water, water that covers everything. He sees the city submerged, he sees people drowning, he sees chaos and destruction. He does not understand these dreams. He performs the appropriate rituals to ward off evil omens. He makes extra offerings at the temple. He consults with a diviner, who studies the dreams and provides ambiguous interpretations. Water in dreams can mean many things, the diviner says. It might represent fertility, abundance, or it might warn of danger, of being overwhelmed. Without more specific signs, I cannot say with certainty. Atrahasis thanks the diviner and returns home. He tries to forget the dreams. He focuses on his daily work, but the dreams continue, night after night, becoming more vivid, more insistent. Then one night, everything changes. Let yourself drift into this moment, this crucial turning point in the story of the flood. Atrahasis is sleeping in his house. His family sleeps around him. The night is quiet, the city is at rest. Then he hears a voice. It seems to come from outside, from the reed wall of his house, but it is not speaking to him directly. It is speaking to the wall itself. Wall, I will tell you something. Reed wall, listen to my words. Man of Shurupak, hear what I say. Atrahasis is instantly awake. He recognizes the voice. It is Enki, the God is speaking, but in a strange way, addressing the wall rather than the man. A great flood is coming. The Council of the Gods has decreed it. All humanity will be destroyed, but you can be saved. Build a boat. Make it according to these dimensions, the voice continues, providing detailed instructions, the exact size and shape of the boat, the materials to use, how to waterproof it, how much food and supplies to store, what animals to bring aboard. Atrahasis listens in shock and awe. A flood? All humanity destroyed? It seems impossible. Incredible. Yet the voice is undeniably divine. This is not a dream. This is real communication from one of the great gods. When the voice falls silent, Atrahasis remains awake, his heart pounding. What should he do? The instructions were clear. He must build this boat. But how can he accomplish such a thing? The boat described would be enormous, far larger than any vessel ever built. It would require tremendous resources, many workers. People will think him mad. But if the god has commanded it, he must obey. There is no choice. Divine will cannot be questioned or ignored. As dawn breaks, Atrahasis rises. He gathers his family. He tells them what he heard in the night. His wife looks at him with concern. His children are frightened, but they trust him. They trust that he truly heard divine words. We will do as the god commands, his wife says simply. We will build the boat. Atrahasis goes to the temple. He makes a special offering. He does not speak of what he heard, for he senses that this knowledge is dangerous, that others must not know, but he prays for guidance, for strength to accomplish what has been commanded. Then he begins the work. Let the peace of deep sleep surround you as we watch this great project unfold.